This is our lecture on early childhood social emotional development, and it is also the last lecture of Unit 2. So first let's talk about identity. Well, in early childhood we see egocentrism fading away, and preschoolers now care what other people think about them. So they're starting to feel those more complex emotions like embarrassment, pride, and envy. And we see the development of an identity. Remember, self-identity is not believed to be present during the first year of life. And between ages 1 and 2, the toddler learns that he is a separate entity from his mother. And then preschool children take that further and begin to form an idea of who they are, their personality traits, their likes and their dislikes, etc. So how do they describe themselves? Well, preschoolers are still very concrete, and they describe themselves based on concrete things, which means things that are visible. So they will tell you about their physical attributes, eye color, hair color, whether they're short or tall, etc. They might describe themselves by their possessions, by what they own. They might say, I have a dog, or I have Transformers. They'll describe themselves with the activities that they like I like to draw, or I like to ride my bike. And they'll use comparisons to others, like I'm bigger than my sister. Only after age 6 do children start to add abstract traits such as nice or smart. But we do have to be careful at this age because a child internalizes what they hear about them and what is told about them. So if they're constantly told negative things, they will begin to internalize them, such as you're so naughty, or you're a pain, or you're stupid. These things can be implied as well as said directly, such as, why haven't you figured this out yet? Or why can't you be good for just 1 minute? They're starting to figure out who they are, and if they're constantly hearing these messages, they will internalize them and make those part of their perceived personality. But the opposite is true as well. A child who is constantly told good things will internalize those. So now to gender identity. So in preschool, they're starting to realize that their gender is fixed. Before this point, they think they can grow up to be the opposite sex. If you ask a toddler boy, he might think he can grow up and be a girl, or vice versa. But by age 6, children know that their sexes are rigid and cannot be changed, and their gender starts to become part of their identity. In preschool, they really have rigid gender roles, though. Gender starts to become important to them, so they can be very fixed in their ideas of what is right for a boy to do and what is right for a girl to do. So you might hear them say, like, you can't do that, or you can't wear that, that's for girls, or that's a boy toy, why are you playing with that? So they get really fixed ideas about what gender is, and they stick to them a lot. They're very rigid in them. And again, it's because of that internalization. The gender roles they see at home get internalized. So they think that all people have to follow the same roles. So whatever they see their mom doing at home, they'll think that that's what all girls have to do. Whatever they see their dad doing, that's what all boys have to do. It goes to the chores they do, the things they play with, the clothes they wear. They internalize what they see at home. So children who have egalitarian parents, those are parents who kind of share all the tasks and don't fall into rigid gender roles. So children with parents who are more egalitarian show less rigidness in their gender role schemas. Elementary school children show less stereotyping if their parents are engaged in egalitarian behavior at home. For example, the mother washes the car, mows the lawn, assembles toys, father washes the dishes, tucks the children into bed, sings them songs, things like that. Those children show less stereotyping about gender roles. Maternal employment is associated with less polarized gender role concepts for girls and boys as well. So when a mom stays at home and dad goes to work, children tend to make very black and white images of what a man does and what a woman does. But when mom also goes to work, it's more gray. They do prefer the same-sex playmates at this stage. Toddlers don't care. They don't recognize gender. They'll play with whoever. But in preschool, they start to gravitate toward children the same sex as them. We see them engage in different types of play with same-sex and with opposite-sex children. With opposite-sex playmates, they tend to engage in parallel play, which is playing next to each other without interacting, or observational play, where they just watch each other. With the same sex, they interact more and are more cooperative. And by age 6, the genders are mostly segregated. You tend to see boys playing with boys and girls playing with boys. So, why is that? Well, there are some possibilities. The first is play compatibility. They play the same way as kids of the same gender, and they prefer the same types of games. So maybe it's not that I prefer to play with boys, but I prefer to play with trucks, and the other boys prefer to play with trucks. So we're all going to play trucks together. It could also be cognitive schemas of boys and girls. So children have schemas about what boys and girls are like, and this gives them stereotypes and exaggerated notions, and it makes them gravitate more toward their own gender. There could also be operant conditioning at work. Gender identities are mostly learned by observation and reinforcement. So they're based on what they see their parents doing, books, TV, their peers. So an example of operant conditioning with gender roles is a boy picks up a doll and the other boys make fun of him. So the boy no longer wants to play with dolls. That would be operant conditioning. Maybe a father who yells at the preschool teacher for letting his boy wear a dress during pretend play. Well, that boy doesn't want his teacher to get yelled at, so he won't put on a dress next time. Girls are told not to get dirty or play too rough, so it's like they're scolded when they play in a way that's considered boyish. Advertisements in stores and on TV that show only one gender playing with a type of toy may make children think that it's a girl toy or a boy toy. In books, you have to be careful. If a doctor is always a man and a nurse is always a woman, they'll start to internalize those roles. So that's operant conditioning, that's social learning. So there is some behaviorism at play in gender roles. There's also peer pressure. Children are made fun of or criticized for violating perceived gender roles, and preschoolers are pretty brutal about it. Boys tend to be treated more harshly for doing girly things than the reverse. And they will, since they are now caring what their peers think about them, they will succumb to this peer pressure. So some theories of gender differences. There's the social cognitive model. This says that children learn their gender through observation. They learn what their culture considers masculine and feminine by observing and then modeling models of the same sex, such as parents or other adults, other children, characters in TV shows and books, etc. And then there's socialization. Children are rewarded with smiles and companionship when they display the correct behavior for their gender, and they are punished by social rejection when they display the wrong behavior. So there's expectations and modeling. Boys are generally encouraged to be more independent, while girls are more restricted. Fathers are more likely than mothers to communicate what's quote-unquote normal for gender-type behavior. And fathers tend to encourage behavior in boys that gets things done, called instrumental behavior, while encouraging girls to develop warm, nurturing behavior. Fathers also like to cuddle more with daughters and play rough with sons. So the expectations parents have of a daughter versus a son and the way they model for them will also change how the child perceives gender. Another theory of gender differences is from Lawrence Kohlberg, his cognitive development model. He says that gender roles solidify after children acquire a cognitive understanding of what girl versus boy means in their culture, and then they socialize themselves to conform. It's a subtle difference between this theory and the previous one. In the social learning model, they think, I'm treated like a boy, therefore I must be one. In Kohlberg's cognitive development model, it's, I am a boy, therefore I will find out how to behave like one. So it's just two similar models, but they have the cause and effect backwards from each other. But in Kohlberg's theory, there are 3 stages. There's your basic gender identity. So by age 3, children are able to label themselves as a boy or a girl, even if they don't really understand what it means yet. Next, we have gender stability, which starts to appear in preschool. Now they perceive gender as a stable aspect over time. I'm a boy now, I'll always be a boy. And then we get into gender consistency. So by age 7, they start to see gender as stable across different situations. I'm still a boy even if I'm doing a girly activity, or like I'm still a girl even though I like to play sports. They start to realize that. So a combined perspective between this theory and the previous one, maybe recognizing that there are subtle differences based on genetics and brain structure, but imitation and self-direction play a role in the process of establishing a gender identity. It's not just all in our genes. So, psychological androgyny. Remember, androgyny is neither male nor female. So, cultural stereotypes polarize males and females. So, emotional boys who show nurturing and tender behavior are likely to be categorized as feminine. Girls who are outspoken and competitive are likely to be described as masculine and therefore unfeminine. So, is it better to be a tomboy or a sissy? Why? In our culture, what's better? Well, a tomboy. A girl who's a tomboy is cool, but a boy who's a sissy is probably teased. Why do you think that is? Can someone be both masculine and feminine at the same time? Many modern psychologists believe that masculinity and femininity are not opposite ends of a sliding scale, but rather orthogonal, independent personality traits. People with both types of traits, both masculine and feminine, are termed psychologically androgynous. A good deal of evidence suggests that children and adolescents who are androgynous are relatively well adjusted because they can summon a wider range of traits to meet the challenges in their life. They have better social relations, superior adjustment, greater creativity, and more willingness to pursue occupations stereotyped as belonging to the other gender. So overall, this is a good thing. I have a video to watch. You may not be able to watch it the way it's embedded in the lecture, and I couldn't find a YouTube link for it. If you can't watch it, don't worry about it. It's just another way of describing these gender differences and how they're socialized. So here's a quest for you. Are there only two genders? Is gender a sliding scale with male and female being the extremes? Find an example in another culture that disputes the binary gender idea. Email me with what you found and your thoughts. We will talk about Erikson's theory and more in the next video.